So now I'm going to add this to my data basket. And as we go through that data, the shopping cart, if I click now on my shopping cart and I would say request dataset access, which would allow me to say, hey, I need access to these sets from this time to this time for these reasons. This is a subset of information that you might need. You might think of more things. That's fine. You can build out this form for more information on that. Have a look at the workflow modules on how to build this out. But as we check out this data, we're going to traverse to a workflow again. And that workflow is going to ask different people to check things. And one of the things that they could check is, well, what's actually the license and the policy that's linked to this data set, right? So that people could say, well, I want to use this data set for stuff outside of my business unit, but can I use that? That's where our policy manager comes in. So let's have a look at that. Let me first create a new policy. And I think I can't create one yet because I don't have a policy domain yet. All right, so what I'm going to do first in my under my training community, I'm going to foresee a domain where I can store policies and so on. So what I'm going to create here is a new organizational point, a data domain, and I'm going to create a policy. So I'm going to create a policy domain. I'm going to call it data policies. We could have different policies scattered across the different lines of business and so on. So it's always good to go to the policy manager to have an index across the organization. So here I'm going to create new policies. Notice the suggested assets that I create, a new policy. I'm going to call this, let's say, customer data policy. There we go. And I'll create this in my training domain. Create. Voila, I've got my policy. And in that policy, as you could expect, we're going to set people responsible. We're going to fill in the whole template. For now, I'm just going to say customer data cannot leave the business unit, just to make it simple for myself. There we go. I'm going to save this. Notice that if there's keywords that he detects that exist already as assets, he's going to highlight this and he's going to detect that these are available. So you can always cross-reference them, which is quite interesting. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say that this policy is applicable to my data set, to my CLV trending data set. There we go. So that when people go and say, hey, this data set, I want access to this, they can see right away what policy is actually linked to it, rather than having to find out from somebody via an email or via a phone call or meeting, that there's a policy that exists somewhere on the intranet in SharePoint or so. We're going to see that this policy applies to my CLV trending data set. And I see all my context about it. I used my my lineage here to just show that this is possible to find out as well. So by default, we'll have this explore lineage where I can see that this policy is applicable here. So that's where our policy manager comes in. A lot more to say about this. Have a look at these links underneath on why policies and how you create good policies and standards and so on. Now, two things we haven't seen yet. Well, three things actually, if you also take into account the settings. The reference data, right? Why reference data? Well, again, look at the links underneath. There's a whole thing to say about this, but rather than, for example, saying, what's a good example? This data set is linked to these projects, for example. What could be nice is to link in project codes. And project codes are code values. So these are not business terms. This is not really metadata. These are actual code values. This is actual data. This is actually the only set of data that Collibra will store. Well, those code values can be administered in the reference data. And then you can link them, for example, to code sets, like this is all project data, project codes in my project management tool, but these link to these project codes, which actually crosswalk, right, one-to-one to another set of codes in another system, and so on. You could link those code sets or code values to data sets or business terms, and so on. For more information, have a look at the link below.